10 or 13 blissful years without realizing this fact, that people are inherently selfish and they are inherently self-interested. On opposition side, we're saying that that's not a bad thing. In fact, that has been the main driving force that has driven growth economically and socially for the world until we create the place we are today. They told you, they seem to have this problem with the concept that in order for you to be at the top, you need to push someone down. We think that with that concept, at least someone gets to the top. We told you that even if some people are the only people who can achieve growth, at least we have wealth to be redistributed. Under their side, there is no mechanism in which I can achieve the type of growth and competition which is required in order for people to have a good livelihood. The goal of economics to begin with, the goal that Marx also tried to accomplish, was to improve the well-being of people in this society. They never told you how they can achieve a society with Marx that hasn't declined in order for people to have a good livelihood. That's something that we don't think is acceptable in today's debate. Now, to my first rebuttal, on the concept that they talked about how Marxism failed because there were other people who were more competitive. Well, that in itself proves that countries that were more competitive and used capitalistic mode of production did better than countries that used Marxism, which proves our point even more. That a world in which Marxism was more dominant would have been a world in which people didn't achieve as much growth economically as they have today. That means they would not have the type of level of education, of healthcare, of livelihood that they do have today. We told you that all these selfish needs or principles that we're talking about are for a good end goal. Like Adam Smith talked about, capitalism preaches. It's a concept of the harmony of interests. Everything that happens in a good place and can only happen with Marxism, not as a dominant idea because it in itself is flawed and is the antithesis of that type of growth that we're talking about. The competitive environment is just better. Second rebuttal, on the concept that, if Marxism had declined, people would still be equal and everybody would be happy. The fact of the matter is there was never a scenario where people living under Marxism were happily sharing resources equally. Why? It's because structurally speaking, Marxism doesn't allow for that system to happen, right? Because people are self-interested, there's never a scenario in which people can all own the means of production without the state involved. The road to get there is through socialism. And Jesse told you several problems with that. That when the state owns the means of production and tries to distribute it, first of all, we can't trust the state to be benevolent. We can't trust the state to make sure that it's doing it fairly. Second of all, we told you that these states are more politically prone to abuse of power by the state and become totalitarian, become dictatorial. That's why Marxism in itself is really harmful. Now, we told you also the concept of space race and things, for example, happen for a reason, right? We think because people are competitive and self-interested, that's why we sent a man to the moon. Without that competition, he would not be able to get the process. I'm going to elaborate more in my argument. Third rebuttal, on the concept of the sharing of information and the sort of benefits that happen. Within the sharing of information happens also under a capitalistic mode of production. Within competitiveness drives people to want to share information if it could further the whole sphere or the whole field of research that they're in as a whole. Within sharing information happens, and we don't really think, and that's a real problem. Which speaks to a bigger characteristic, no thank you, under a competition, that people do want to share certain information and do have certain socialistic tendencies, because at the end of the day, there's morality and there's values we want to hold to. Yes, sir?
Now, if people are willing to share information, why do military still exist? Why do cooperation exist?
Military services are there for national security. It's a completely different scenario. We don't see how it relates to the topic. Sorry. Now, to my argumentation on the prioritization of the value of equality and growth, right? Because we told you this directly relates to the case. Ideology, it's about which ideology should be the dominant one. And this is the nuance that they miss for the debate, for the entire debate, right? First of all, we told you that growth is important because it gives people better livelihoods, which is the goal. We prefer an economy. If an economy was a pie, we prefer a bigger pie that's not evenly sliced than a smaller piece of pie that's evenly sliced. Because we say that there's already incentive and means for people to care about equality. People do care about equality. Jesse talked about the fact that right now social safety nets have never been stronger in the world. Progressive income tax exists, and people do buy into that analysis. So equality can exist with that growth. But we told you this, that there is a trade-off between Marxism championing the idea of total equality, not some equality, that hinders growth economically, right? We told you, and socially as well, we told you there are several economic ideas that are involved in that. We're going to talk first about the idea of competition. We think the fact of the matter is, if everybody can sit around in the States and they give you equal means of production, no matter how much investment and human capital you put into the process, no one is going to want to do anything. The fact of the matter is, it is a good thing that there's a process of natural selection that happens in the economy. When you feel that if you don't work hard to try to achieve growth, someone else is going to outdo you and drive you out of business. That's the only type of incentive. It's going to get people off of their asses and work harder. Because people are united under the concept of profit incentive. That's why economies are driven, and that's why you achieve growth, right? We told you that under Marxism, no one has incentive to do anything. That's why competition matters. Secondly, we also talked about how it hinders economic growth and the concept of pooling capital and funds together, right? We think it is a big economic concept that Jesse has also talked about as well. When we talk about the fact that certain types of investments that yield more productivity requires a higher pooling of funds. If you distribute wealth and income equally, no one's going to be the entrepreneur, the capitalist, the people who are angel investors, who can invest in higher productivity firms or higher industrial firms that's going to give your country more output, higher GDP, thus people with better livelihoods. They still haven't given you an alternative to that. Thirdly, we also talked about how redistribution of wealth can happen with growth as well. When growth is higher, then it means that if the state still sticks to the same mechanism of tax redistribution and things like that, they can do that more efficiently without having to be hindered by all the bureaucracy that we talk about under a Marxist state. When people make higher incomes, everybody's better off in the society. That's the idea of a trickle-down effect. Then fourthly, we also talked about concept that Jesse touched on, and they never really rebutted, on the concept of land, distribution, all these sorts of things. And why is it okay, principally speaking, why is it justified that the state can come in, take your land, take all your profits away, and redistribute it to everyone? They told you, they argue that equality is a good thing, but they never told you why the means to achieving that is something that's justified. Mr. Speaker, at the end of this debate, ask yourself, if growth is something that is directly hindered by the concept of Marxism, should it be something that you champion when equality can also exist under the concept of capitalist order production? We don't think there's any question about it, and that's why I found it.
The speaker spoke for